Welcome, adventurers, to Tome and Torch, the podcast where we explore the hidden gems of tabletop gaming.
And occasionally debate whether our character sheets have too many doodles on them.
We're your hosts, Dex Modifiér
And Rhea Frost.
And today we're diving into the lush, overgrown world of Fabula Ultima's newest release, the Natural Fantasy Atlas.
Ah yes, the age-old sound of nature being interrupted by random encounters. Today's episode is all about the third and final genre, Atlas for Fabula Ultima, Need Games' love letter to JRPGs in tabletop form.
If you've ever wanted to play a tabletop game that feels like Secret of Mana had a baby with Stardew Valley, while Chrono Cross watched approvingly from the corner, this might be the book for you.
Now that's a mental image I wish I'd never had.
But first, a word from our imaginary sponsor.
Tired of endless treks ruining your favorite adventuring boots? Introducing the Floralist's Footwear. Boots that actually grow stronger the muddier they get.
I stepped in quicksand, and my boots sprouted emergency vines that pulled me to safety. Then, they bloomed tiny flowers that turned into fruit I could actually eat.
Made with genuine magical leather, harvested from ethically raised, polymorphed cows with regenerative hide enchantments. Just don't water these boots after midnight, or your feet might end up somewhere unexpected. Side effects may include spontaneous root growth, occasional sentience, and complaining about your sock choice. Not responsible for boots that decide to start their own adventuring party.
All right, let's get into it. The Natural Fantasy Atlas is the third and final genre-specific supplement for Fabula Ultima, completing what the designers call their core trilogy of settings.
If you're not familiar with Fabula Ultima, it's basically, what if your favorite 90s JRPGs had a tabletop system designed specifically for them? Think Final Fantasy, Chrono Trigger, or Secret of Mana, but with dice and character sheets instead of controllers.
The core game came out a few years back, and since then they've released the High Fantasy Atlas, which is all epic quests and challenging the gods, and the Techno Fantasy Atlas, which is your cyberpunk dystopia with magic thrown in.
So, what makes Natural Fantasy different?
Well, imagine if your JRPG focused less on saving the world and more on communing with it. It's about cycles of nature, coexistence, and the bittersweet passage of time.
It's a 208-page full-color book that includes 4 new character classes, 10 archetypal locations for your game, new mechanics for crafting and downtime, 5 boss enemies to challenge your players, and enough gorgeous art to make your wallet weep with joy.
The physical edition also comes with a PDF, which is always nice for those midnight prep sessions when you don't want to wake your partner by flipping through a physical book. Okay, so let's talk about what natural fantasy actually means in the context of Fabula Ultima. This isn't just let's go camping in D&D. It's a specific JRPG subgenre with its own themes and vibes.
According to the Atlas, natural fantasy centers around 2 major themes, preservation and death. It's about maintaining harmony with nature and traditions, while acknowledging the inevitable changes and cycles of life.
It's funny, when I first heard natural fantasy, I immediately thought, oh, like Studio Ghibli movies. But the book actually says it's not directly inspired by Ghibli.
Right. Instead, it mentions games like the Atelier series, especially the Dusk trilogy, and Monster Hunter stories as its major inspirations.
Which makes sense when you think about it. Those games are all about gathering resources, living alongside nature, and dealing with the consequences of past civilizations' mistakes.
There's this underlying melancholy to natural fantasy that I find really interesting. The book talks about how these stories often involve young heroes confronting the mistakes of the past and trying to forge a better future. A brave future of coexistence, as they put it.
It's like the world is telling you, hey, previous generations really messed up this forest, valley, and/or ancient magic system, but maybe you plucky kids can fix it without repeating their mistakes.
Exactly, and unlike high fantasy where you might literally challenge gods, or techno fantasy where you're bringing down evil corporations, natural fantasy operates on a more intimate scale. The battles might be smaller, but the stakes feel more personal.
The Atlas uses this interesting term, It says natural fantasy stories are more vertical than horizontal, meaning you might explore one forest or valley deeply rather than globetrotting across a whole continent.
Which is perfect for those of us who are tired of saving the entire universe every campaign. Sometimes I just want to save one really cool tree, you know?
The really cool tree appreciates your service.
Now let's talk about what players are really excited about, the 4 new character classes. First up is the Invoker, which is essentially a summoner type that channels environmental or temporal powers.
The Invoker is described as situational, which means its abilities change based on external conditions. The GM incorporates environmental elements into scenes, like elemental spirits or certain times of day, and the Invoker's powers adapt to those conditions.
So, you might be super powerful near a volcano, but pretty useless in the middle of the ocean?
Exactly. It forces the party to think strategically about where and when they engage in conflicts. Players who love adapting to situations will have a blast, while those who prefer consistency might get frustrated.
Next, we have the Floralist, which is basically a magical gardener. They grow Magiseeds that can bloom into healing plants, elemental damage dealers, or status buffers.
The Floralist feels a bit like the Esper from the Techno Fantasy Atlas, in that both use time tracking mechanics, but instead of technological energy building up, you're waiting for your seeds to sprout.
It's a support mage hybrid that requires planning ahead. You're planting seeds in early rounds that will bloom later, which means you're always thinking a few steps ahead.
Then there's the Gourmet, which might be the most delightfully weird class in the book. They're a chef adventurer who cooks mystical dishes from ingredients you gather.
The best part? The Gourmet's abilities are semi-unknown until you actually use them. The Atlas specifically notes that gourmet players don't fully know what their recipes do until they try them in play.
It's like cooking in real life. I think this will be a pasta sauce, but it might end up being soup. Let's find out.
I think this will heal our party, but it might turn us all into frogs. Let's find out.
One reviewer described playing the Gourmet as a true experience of chaos and adaptation, which sounds both terrifying and amazing.
Finally, we have the Merchant, which is the most straightforward of the new classes. They focus on obtaining resources, making deals, and leveraging wealth for the party's benefit.
If the other classes feel mechanically complex, the Merchant is a nice balance. It's accessible but still fits perfectly with the theme of community and commerce that runs through natural fantasy.
I love that these classes really emphasize different playstyles. The Invoker is for adaptable players, the Floralist is for planners, the Gourmet is for chaos goblins, and the Merchant is for people who secretly wish they were playing an economic sim.
Hey, some of us just like having the best gear without having to fight for it.
Beyond the classes, the Natural Fantasy Atlas introduces some wonderful new mechanics that really enhance the cozy vibe of the game.
My favorite is the camp activities system. When your party rests, you can undertake special activities, like brewing tonics, telling stories, or fortifying your campsite, that give you minor buffs or create roleplay moments.
It's such a smart addition, because it encourages those quiet, character-building scenes that make JRPGs memorable. You know, those moments around the campfire where Aerith tells Cloud about her childhood or whatever.
The Atlas even includes a character trait called a Quirk that makes camp activities mandatory in your game, showing how important the designers think these downtime moments are.
For those who might not be aware, Quirks are optional character traits that were first introduced in the High Fantasy Atlas. In natural fantasy, they're tailored to themes of nature and history. Maybe you're bound to a forest spirit or carry an ancient curse.
They add a nice layer of roleplay depth without overwhelming complexity. It's one of those opt-in if you want more features that I appreciate in game design.
Then there's the custom weapon forging system, which expands on crafting rules from previous books. You can gather natural materials, like fangs from monsters or wood from ancient trees, and craft personalized weapons and tools.
It's very Monster Hunter in that way. I just need 3 more dire wolf pelts, and then I can make the Moonlight Cloak.
And suddenly your whole party is hunting wolves for 6 sessions while the main quest sits on the back burner.
As nature intended. Let's talk about what the Atlas offers for Game Masters. Besides the 4 classes and new mechanics, there's a treasure trove of world-building tools.
The 10 archetypal locations are probably the most immediately useful. Each one is a detailed setting with adventure hooks, like ancient forests where time flows strangely, or pastoral villages with hidden secrets.
What I love is that they're presented as modular pieces. You're not given a fixed world to memorize. You get building blocks to create your own unique natural fantasy setting.
The book also includes 5 villains, or boss enemies that increase in power and complexity. They're designed to be more than just combat challenges. Many have multiple forms, or can be defeated through non-violent means.
One villain, Eldgren, is described as a puzzle that tests the player's clever use of abilities and spells rather than brute force. It really emphasizes that natural fantasy isn't just about hitting things harder.
Throughout the book, there are designer notes that explain the thinking behind certain mechanics or themes. These are super helpful for GMs who want to understand how to capture the specific natural fantasy vibe.
The Atlas warns that if you're not careful, your natural fantasy campaign could easily slide into just being a standard high fantasy adventure. It actually advises reading the manual very attentively and familiarizing yourself with the inspirational games to get the most out of it.
Which might sound a bit prescriptive, but it shows how much the designers care about nailing the specific tone they're going for.
For GMs trying to capture that tone, here's our quick natural fantasy checklist.
1. Keep the scale intimate. Focus on one region or community.
2. Make nature a character, not just scenery.
3. Incorporate themes of preservation and cycles.
4. Include relics of the past that influence the present.
5. Allow for both melancholy and hope in your storytelling.
And don't forget to use those camp activities. They're like little built-in roleplay prompts that help develop your characters and the world. It's time for Tales from the Tavern, where we share real experiences from players and GMs.
First up, we have The Gourmet's Surprise from Alex in Seattle.
I played a gourmet named Chef Mimi in our natural fantasy campaign. We were facing a corrupted forest guardian, and I had gathered some glowing mushrooms earlier. I used my speculative cuisine ability to cook them, having no idea what would happen. Turns out, the dish temporarily transformed our entire party into nature spirits who could communicate with the guardian directly. What was supposed to be a boss fight turned into a negotiation, and we ended up helping heal the guardian instead of defeating it. Our GM was as surprised as we were.
That's the beauty of the gourmet class, unexpected solutions to problems.
Next, we have Camping Done Right from Jamie in Toronto.
Our GM really embraced the camp activity system. Each night, our characters would set up camp, and we'd all choose different activities. My merchant would tell stories about distant markets, our floralist would tend to her seed collection, and our invoker would commune with local spirits. These scenes started as simple mechanics, but they became our favorite parts of the session. We learned so much about our characters through these quiet moments. When one of our party nearly died in a battle, it hit so much harder because we'd spent all those evenings around the campfire together.
That's exactly what the system is designed for, building those emotional connections between characters.
Here's an interesting one called Too Much of a Good Thing from Taylor in London.
I'll be honest, my group struggled a bit with the Natural Fantasy Atlas at first. We came from playing a high fantasy campaign where we were practically demigods, and scaling back to a more intimate story was a challenge. The new classes have a lot of moving parts, especially the Invoker and Gourmet. We felt a bit overwhelmed until we realized we were trying to use all the new mechanics at once. Once we slowed down and introduced things gradually, it clicked. Now our natural fantasy campaign is our favorite, but there was definitely a learning curve.
That's a fair point. There's a lot to digest in this book, and it does raise the complexity level of Fabula Ultima a bit.
And finally, A Forest Like a Character from Sam in Melbourne.
Our GM built our entire campaign around a single massive forest from the Atlas. Instead of traveling to different locations, we kept discovering new layers of this one place. ancient ruins, spirit realms hidden in fog, communities living in the canopy. The forest literally changed around us based on our actions. If we helped purify a corruption, new areas would open up. The forest felt alive in a way I've never experienced in a tabletop game before. It wasn't just a setting, it was a main character in our story.
That vertical storytelling approach the Atlas talks about really shines through here.
These stories highlight what makes natural fantasy unique. It's about connection to place, unexpected solutions, and seeing how your actions impact the world around you.
We can't talk about a Fabula Ultima book without gushing about the artwork, and the Natural Fantasy Atlas does not disappoint.
The book is absolutely gorgeous. It's full color with that manga-inspired style that Fabula Ultima is known for, mixing detailed character art with adorable chibi illustrations.
The cover shows a diverse party of heroes, including a cat-like person with a chakram and a wheelchair-bound adventurer who appears to be writing or drawing.
It looks like all of them are traveling through some kind of overgrown ruin.
It perfectly captures that natural fantasy vibe. Ruins reclaimed by nature, sunlight filtering through leaves, and hopeful adventurers working together.
Inside, the color palette leans toward earthy tones, vibrant greens, rich browns, and serene blues, reinforcing the natural theme.
The layout is clean and readable, with a subtle leafy motif on the margins that adds flair without being distracting. Important terms are bolded, and sidebars are shaded in light colors.
There are also those cute UI elements that Fabula Ultima books always have, like chibi head icons next to example text or little plant symbols next to nature tips. It really feels like reading a JRPG guidebook.
The Game Master's screen that was released alongside the Atlas is apparently stunning too.
I've seen posts from gaming groups talking about spending their first session just passing the book around and admiring the art. It's that kind of product.
Though I will say, if you're visually impaired or have dyslexia, the full-color pages might be a bit busy. The digital PDF allows for zooming, which helps, but it's something to be aware of.
Overall, the art isn't just window dressing. It's essential to conveying the tone and feel of natural fantasy. When you see a serene illustration of characters gathering herbs in a sunlit meadow, you immediately understand the vibe they're going for.
So what do we think about this final Atlas in the trilogy?
I'm actually a huge fan. I've run 2 sessions with it already, and my players are hooked. Though I'll admit, I spent way too much money on tiny mushroom miniatures that have absolutely no gameplay value.
That's how they get you. But I agree, there's a lot to love here. For me, the camp activities system is the standout feature. It finally gives structure to those moments when players want to just chill and talk in character, which my group lives for.
Let's break it down into pros and cons. Pro number 1. The gourmet class is pure chaos in the best possible way. I played one in a one-shot, and my random cooking experiments turned our rogue into a talking squirrel for an hour.
Which is actually tactically useful. Squirrels can fit through tiny spaces.
Exactly. Pro number 2, the aesthetics are stunning. I'd hang some of these illustrations on my wall if my partner would let me.
They won't?
Apparently, giant fantasy Tree City art doesn't match our living room vibe. Whatever that means.
Their loss. Pro number 3. The world-building tools are fantastic. The 10 archetypal locations saved me hours of prep work. I just tweaked the names and dropped them right into my campaign.
Now for the cons. And there are a few. Con number 1, some of these classes have serious learning curves. The Invoker basically requires the GM to design encounters around their abilities, or they're sitting there uselessly half the time.
Oh, I feel that pain. Sorry, no air spirits in this dungeon. Guess you'll just have to use your basic attack. Again.
Con number 2, the crafting system, while cool in theory, adds another layer of resource tracking that can slow down play. My players spent an entire session just gathering materials and arguing about what to craft.
That sounds like a feature, not a bug.
Depends on the group, I suppose. Con number 3, and this is my biggest gripe. The book talks a big game about vertical storytelling, but doesn't give enough concrete examples of campaign structures. I had to wing it more than I expected.
Comparing it to the other atlases, I'd actually rank Natural Fantasy as my personal favorite. But I'm a sucker for anything with plant magic and cozy vibes. High Fantasy had more immediate utility, but this one has more heart.
Techno Fantasy is probably the most ambitious of the three, but Natural Fantasy is the one I'd recommend to most groups. It's just more approachable. Not everyone wants cyberpunk dystopia.
Though that pilot class with the mecha was pretty sweet.
So sweet.
But you know what's sweeter? Having a character whose signature move is making magical soup.
When you put it that way,
How do you think it compares to similar games?
kind of in the middle. Wanderhome is the peaceful cottagecore dream where nothing bad ever happens. Rhea is the gentle journey across picture postcard landscapes. And Natural Fantasy is the one where you can still stab a corrupted nature spirit if diplomacy fails.
And sometimes you need that option. I tried running Wanderhome for my regular group, and they kept asking, but when do we fight something?
Some players just need that release valve.
In the immortal words of my grandmother, sometimes you just gotta hit stuff with a magic sword.
Your grandmother said that.
She was a complicated woman. And a level 20 paladin.
I think what makes Natural Fantasy special is that it captures that JRPG feeling of wonder without the world-ending stakes. It's like comfort food in RPG form.
Speaking of which, I brought homemade cookies inspired by the gourmet class.
I'm not eating anything you baked after what happened last time.
Come on, that rash was barely noticeable. So, Rhea, it's judgment time, and would you recommend the Natural Fantasy Atlas to our listeners?
Absolutely, but with some caveats. If you're already a Fabula Ultima fan, this is an easy buy. It expands the game in meaningful ways and offers a fresh theme that complements the existing content.
I agree. Who do you think would enjoy this the most?
I'd say it's perfect for groups who love JRPGs but want something cozier than epic world saving. If your ideal gaming session involves gathering herbs, helping a small village, and reflecting on the cycles of nature while occasionally fighting corrupted spirits, this is your jam.
It's also great for groups who enjoy character development and roleplay. The camp activities and the generally slower pace encourage those quiet moments between adventures.
On the flip side, if you're all about epic battles and continent-spanning quests, you might find the Natural Fantasy setting a bit too low-key. The High Fantasy Atlas would be more your speed.
And if you're completely new to tabletop RPGs or prefer very simple rule systems, be aware that there is a learning curve here, especially with classes like the Invoker and Gourmet.
Here's my final verdict. The Natural Fantasy Atlas is a beautiful, thoughtful supplement that captures a unique genre perfectly. It's worth every penny for the right group. I give it 4.5 magical seeds out of 5. It's not flawless, but it's a near-perfect conclusion to Fabula Ultima's Atlas trilogy.
And I give it 9 cozy campfires out of 10. It made me want to gather herbs and contemplate the cycles of the moon, which is not something I can say about most RPG supplements. From ancient forests to pastoral villages,
From gourmet chefs to invokers of natural spirits,
the Natural Fantasy Atlas offers a refreshing take on fantasy role-playing.
it reminds us that not every adventure needs to be about saving the universe. Sometimes the most meaningful stories are about healing one forest, helping one community, or breaking one bad cycle from recurring.
And sometimes the real treasure is the friend you made along the way, who can cook magical food that might turn you into a frog.
This has been our deep dive into Fabula Ultima's Natural Fantasy Atlas. I'm Rhea Frost,
And I'm Dex Modifiér.
reminding you that even in a natural fantasy,
Sometimes you still need to roll for initiative.
happy gaming and may your campfires always be cozy.
So anyway, do you want some of these cookies I baked, or what?
Is this you role-playing as a gourmet now?
Well, excuse me for getting immersed in the episode. I've spent the last hour talking about magical cooking, and now I'm starving.
What unexpected effects might your cooking have?
Based on my last attempt, probably food poisoning.
Produced, written, and recorded by Madeline Jarbo. Music by Afaleen. The Tome and Torch podcast is a production of Tome and Torch Press. No actual trees were threatened by vengeful nature spirits in the making of this podcast.